In the last two videos about Krakow, we talked about the best things to do in the historical town. However, Krakow has an area of 326.8 kilometers squared, or 126.2 miles squared, meaning the old town only comprises about 0.5% of the city. There is so much more to be seen when you leave the oldest part of Krakow and venture to its surroundings. Let that be just across the Vistula River, or in the communist-style district, or even in one of the most beautiful reservoirs you'll ever see. There is so much more to see in the royal capital city of Krakow. There are some other places around Krakow that are very worth visiting. Right on the other side of the Vistula River, we can find the neighborhoods of Zawodcie and Stare Podgorze. Both of these areas of the city have a more modern vibe than the old town. We slightly went over these neighborhoods on the Visiting Krakow video, as Zawodcie is home to Oskar Schindler's enamel factory. Zawodcie was named one of the coolest neighborhoods in the world by Time Out magazine in 2024. I don't know if it truly is one of the coolest places in the world, that is for you to figure out, but what I can actually tell you is that Zawodcie is a fun place to be in. The neighborhood has seen a significant economic growth in the recent years that has given it a sense of modernity that is not too characteristic of Krakow's city center. Of course, it is best known by tourists for Oskar Schindler's enamel factory, but it has become a popular spot for many locals. Today, Zawodcie is a mix of historical landmarks, modern art, and a lively social scene. Historically, the area used to be an industrial hub. However, many of the warehouses and industrial buildings have been repurposed into stylish apartments, local cafes, and creative spaces. The revival of Zawodcie has successfully blended the old with the new like not many other cities have been able to. Plus, its riverfront parks, amazing restaurants, and lively pubs add to the splendor of the neighborhood. Another neighborhood that shares many of its characteristics with Zawodcie is Stare Podgorze. Stare Podgorze translates to Old Podgorze, as it used to be the city center of the former independent city of Podgorze. The land across the Vistula River from Kazimierz used to be its own city until 1795. Eventually, this city was absorbed by Krakow and became one of its districts. Old Podgorze still maintains many of the characteristics of an old town, but it is more recognized by its three main attractions: the Jewish Ghetto Memorial, the Krakow Płażów concentration camp, and the Krakow Mound. The Jewish population of Krakow suffered terribly during World War II, and the district of Podgorze was the epicenter of that dark chapter in history. Nazi Germany established a Jewish ghetto within Podgorze in March 1941, which essentially became a district-wide prison. During the 2 years the Jewish ghetto stood, every single one of its inhabitants suffered immensely. In 1943, the ghetto was liquidated when the majority of its residents were murdered, and the survivors sent to meet their demise at the nearby Krakow Płażów concentration camp or the infamous Auschwitz concentration camp. Today, Old Podgorze commemorates the lives of the victims of the Krakow ghetto with the Jewish Ghetto Memorial. This historical landmark is a monument located at Plac Bohaterów Ghetto. For those curious about the ghetto's history, right in front of the square you can find the Eagle Pharmacy. During World War II, Eagle Pharmacy was the only pharmacy allowed inside the Krakow ghetto. The pharmacy was owned by Tadeusz Pankiewicz, the only non-Jew within the ghetto. Pankiewicz and his staff risked their lives by turning the pharmacy into a meeting point for the Jewish population. In addition of offering medical aid and medicines, the pharmacy was also the place where people would hide, learn news from the outside, or be smuggled out of the ghetto. Plus, it was a base for resistance groups and the meeting point for many Jews, especially the intellectuals of the ghetto. Today, Eagle Pharmacy is a museum that can be visited Wednesdays through Sundays from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. The museum is a recreation of the pharmacy during the Nazi occupation, giving its visitors an idea of life inside the Krakow ghetto. Tickets for the Eagle Pharmacy Museum cost 20 zloty or $5.52, although entrance is free on Wednesdays. Another major landmark linked to the Krakow ghetto is the Krakow Płażów concentration camp. Płażów camp was a horrific place that attempted to completely dehumanize its prisoners, especially those of Jewish descent. A sign of this is where the Nazis decided to build the camp. Two Jewish cemeteries once stood where the camp was erected. The former tombs were destroyed to give way to one of humanity's most obscure places. Initially, Płażów camp was a forced labor camp, but it later became a concentration camp. Despite its denomination, the camp was notorious for its documented terrors under the command of Amon Goth. This SS commander was sadistic like no other and a complete monster. The movie Schindler's List gives a good inkling of who he was, but most accounts assure he was even worse. Today, not many buildings remain at Płażów camp, since the Nazis destroyed most of the evidence when retreating near the end of World War II. However, no cover-up can ever erase the scars of the past, and several information boards now stand where most of the buildings once did. Płażów camp was decently sized, so you will have to walk around a little bit if you want to check out its entirety. For me, this is a definitely must since it is a great way to learn of the atrocities occurred during the Holocaust. I believe that the lack of crowds of tourists and tourist guides, like other camps, make the experience a little bit more personal. It is very different to Auschwitz camp, so it will give you a different perspective of World War II. You can get to Płażów camp by taking the tram line 3 or the regional train line SKA1. On a lighter note, very close to Płażów camp, we can find Krakow's Mound. Krakow's Mound is the alleged birthplace for the historical leader of Krakow, King Krakos. We have discussed Krakos extensively in other videos, especially the Babel Hill video. Nevertheless, the gist of it is that Krakos is accredited with the foundation of the city of Krakow and is part of Polish lore. Nowadays, Krakow's Mound is visited by many either trying to check out the king's burial place or wanting to hang out at the park. I'm not gonna lie to you, there is not much to do at Krakow's Mound besides reading the commemorative plaques and climbing to the top. However, once you are up there, you will have a great view of the city. Plus, you can catch some of the best sunsets in Krakow if you time your visit correctly. Heading northeast from Podgorze, you can reach the district of Nowa Huta. Similarly to Podgorze, Nowa Huta used to be its own city at some point, but now it is a district of Krakow. The city of Nowa Huta was established in 1949 as a piece of communist propaganda by the Polish People's Republic. Its absolute contrast with Krakow's old town was an attempt to portray a socialist utopia that could subside the strong anti-communist sentiment Krakow had. In true communist fashion, the buildings in Nowa Huta have a socialist realist architecture. Socialist realist architecture is the official name for those ugly block buildings we can see all over the former socialist republics. A little eyesore, but I digress. Nowa Huta broke with everything that made Krakow special. Instead, its main goal was to become a lackluster and soulless place where workers of the nearby steel factory could rest between shifts. Nonetheless, visiting Nowa Huta gives its visitors an insight to how life was under communism. Plus, I do have to admit that Nowa Huta was planned masterfully, and there is beauty in its layout and wide avenues. The three best things in Nowa Huta are Plac Centralny, the Ark of the Lord Church, and Wanda Mound. Plac Centralny translates to Central Square. As you might infer, it is the main area of the district. It is the converging point for the five main avenues of Nowa Huta, and from where the former city expanded outwards. The Central Square was named Ronald Reagan Central Square in 2004, although the locals just call it Plac Centralny. About 2 kilometers or 1.2 miles to the northwest of the Central Square, we can find the Ark of the Lord Church, officially called the Church of Our Lady Queen of Poland. It was the first church to be built in Nowa Huta since 1949. The history behind its construction could be very well turned into a great historical drama and speaks wonders of the determination of Polish people. In line with the policy of atheism followed by communist nations, the design of Nowa Huta lacked a church. This was a big no-no for a deeply Catholic country like Poland. By 1952, its inhabitants began applying for permits to build a church. The movement was backed by Karol Wojtyła, the future Pope John Paul II. Still, the government remained strong in its opposition to the construction of a church in Nowa Huta. It wasn't until 1956 that the people's resistance and the Polish political thaw led to a permit being granted. This feat was commemorated with erecting a wooden cross at the construction site to mark the future location of the church. However, in October 1959, the government withdrew the construction permit and the land was taken back, despite the fact that the groundwork had already started. Soon after, it was decided that a school would take the church's spot, and the wooden cross had to be taken down. Karol Wojtyła and the people of Nowa Huta were vehemently opposed to the removal of the cross as it had become an object of worship. Therefore, on April 27, 1960, the 1960 Nowa Huta protests broke out in response of the government attempt to remove the cross. It all started at 8:30 a.m. when a team of workers arrived to remove the cross, but observers surrounded the cross to prevent its removal. By 2 p.m., the crowd had increased to 2,000 people, and the police decided to disperse the crowd using tear gas and other anti-riot weapons. From then on, constant clashes broke out, and more demonstrators joined the protest that reached 4,000 strong at some point. The situation became uncontrollable for the police, so by 7:50 p.m., the military had been called up to take over the anti-riot effort. Through mass arrests and even shooting civilians, the militias that came from all over southern Poland were able to quell the riots. Even a last attempt by 5,000 demonstrators to protect the cross was swiftly repelled around midnight. The protests continued throughout the night and for several days, but the military made sure nothing got out of control by any means necessary. According to official yet dubious reports, there were 2,000 military casualties, 493 people were arrested, and 87 sentenced to prison. Nevertheless, eyewitnesses suggest that the civilian casualties were 3 or 4 times higher than the officially reported. In the aftermath, a school was built at the construction site, and the wooden cross remained standing, albeit with a military guard present at all times. The authorities believed that the cross would eventually rot and decay, but they didn't anticipate that the faithful had secretly prepared a new oak cross. While the cross's guard was distracted during the Communist Labor Day in the late 1970s, the cross was replaced. That new cross remained until it was decided to be replaced with a metal cross, and later in 2007 with a bronze cross that now stands in the same spot. As for the church itself, not everything was lost. The desire for a church did not subside at all throughout the years, and Karol Wojtyła continued pressuring for the construction of a new church. By 1965, Karol Wojtyła had become Metropolitan Bishop of Kraków and secured a new location for the church's construction. On May 18, 1969, the now Archbishop of Kraków, Cardinal Karol Wojtyła, laid the cornerstone brought from St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican and consecrated by Pope Paul VI. The construction received no governmental aid and was primarily carried out by volunteers. Finally, on May 15, 1977, Cardinal Wojtyła consecrated the church, giving it the name of Our Lady Queen of Poland. During the 1980s, the church became a focal point for anti-communist resistance and remains a major monument in Nowa Huta. In 2002, the Nowa Huta cross ended up getting its church. The small church of the Sacred Heart was consecrated next to the cross and the nearby school. The last thing you need to visit in Nowa Huta is Wanda Mount. I believe that you can guess from Krakow's Mount what Wanda Mount is. And yeah, you'll be right. Wanda Mount is the alleged birthplace for another historical leader of Krakow, Princess Wanda. Wanda was the daughter of the legendary King Cracus, and upon his death, she became the ruler of the Poles. There are several versions of the legend of Wanda that tend to differ slightly among them. The first one says that when Wanda became the ruler of Krakow, her lands were invaded by German troops. Courageously, she led her troops to fight the Germans. However, once the German troops saw her beauty, they refused to fight, and their leader committed suicide. Other versions mention that she did fight the German troops and won, and in a way to thank and repay her pagan gods, she committed suicide in their honor. A later version hints at the fact that there was no war. Instead, Wanda committed suicide by throwing herself into the Vistula River. This version explains that Wanda was aware that a future suitor, most likely from a German tribe, could use a potential refusal to marry him as an excuse to invade her lands. She chose suicide to avoid the suffering of her people. Today, Wanda is a semi-official patron of the Nowa Huta district and has a trade center, street, bridge, and stadium named after her. At the top of Wanda Mount, you can find a statue designed by the Polish artist Jan Matejko. Finally, I like to leave the best for last, so let me tell you about Zagrzówek Park. I have to give you all a disclaimer. I really like this place, so I might be a little bit biased. Zagrzówek Park and Reservoir is a former limestone quarry that was turned into a reservoir in the 1990s. As a fun fact, St. Pope John Paul II once worked at that very limestone quarry during World War II before he was a priest. When the city decided to fully allow the quarry to become a lake, it was illegal to swim at Zagrzówek. There is a good reason why, since the former quarry has been the site of many fatalities. The reservoir, or lake, is surrounded by high cliffs, so many daring souls like to jump off the cliffs. I need to make a big emphasis that this is very dangerous and something that you definitely should not do. Please be smart when visiting and cautious if you decide to swim there. The water is quite deep, so refrain from getting in the water if you are not a good swimmer. Now, if you avoid any stupid behavior and stay clear of the unauthorized areas, you'll be able to experience one of the best things to do in Krakow. The quarry is so beautiful that not telling you about it low-key feels like a crime. In 2023, the city opened 5 pools of different depths and wide walking decks to make the reservoir safer. This section of the quarry is perfect for families and children that still want to go for a swim without the risk associated with the deep lake. The pools are open from June 1st to August 31st between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. The rest of the year, the water temperature is quite cold, so people avoid swimming there unless it is the summer. In peak summer season, the pools get really crowded, so aim to be there by 10 a.m. to avoid long lines that can take up to 3 hours. I want to say that this might change at any time. Time slots might be implemented or new procedures can be put in place. Alternatively, you can always access the open and free beach that is not part of the pool's area. If you keep walking past the pool's entrance, you'll see the signs to the Sports Recreation Complex area. There is no line to enter that area of the quarry, and you can jump into the lake at any time. However, it is also considered that if you swim anywhere in the lake besides the pools, you are doing so at your own risk. There are no lifeguards, no nets, no pools, no nothing. It is you facing a lake with a depth of 32 meters or 105 feet in some areas. It is strongly advised that if you're not a strong swimmer, you should reconsider swimming anywhere but the pools. Still, not everything is about swimming at the quarry. At the free beach, you can sit down, have a picnic, sunbathe, or just hang out as well. You'll see many people just enjoying the beauty of the quarry without actually going for a swim. Also, there are trails that go around the entire quarry that you can walk around and admire the reservoir from above. During the non-summer months, many people like to run or jog around the quarry. Sometimes you'll see groups of people hanging out atop of the cliffs at a safe distance from the edge. Plus, many people like to watch the sunsets or sunrises from the quarry trails. Just remember, no jumping from the cliffs. Be smart, please. Krakow is a very big city, but I believe the 3 videos you can find in my channel about the city is everything you need to see. Of course, if you're able to check everything out, that would be one of the best trips ever. However, I know that it is very unlikely, so I invite you to mix and match some of my recommendations and let me know how it goes. Also, if you have any other must visits that I missed, let me know in the comment section. Please consider subscribing and leaving a like if you enjoyed the video. God bless you and have a great day.